Is Gabby on the call?
Hello, everybody. Hi, everyone. I think I switched on a recording by accident and I don't know how to switch it off when I was trying to connect. So I'm sorry, guys, I'm terrible with IT. But hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this platform. My name is Dr. Gabby. I'm an NHS and private GP. I work mostly in Essex, but also in London. And I've been asked to come and speak to you guys today about the challenges that I have faced as a Black woman working in healthcare, and also giving a little bit of advice to any sort of young Black women who are looking to get into the healthcare industry. What I would say is that it's not been easy, to be honest, as a Black person in healthcare. There have been many challenges, but being actually aware of that people who are prejudiced do actually exist helped me address my situations. So I'll explain the first time I really went through something difficult, which was in university. I had written an essay for my small group, and the woman who marked my essay, the professor who marked my essay, actually pulled me aside afterwards and said that she couldn't understand anything I had written in the essay, and also asked me if English was my first language, and told me that I should join the English support classes for international students who didn't really speak much English. That was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like it. I cried, I was so upset, I called my cousin, and because I really didn't understand how I could be told this. And she just explained to me that in your career, you are going to encounter some people who are going to make things difficult, not to take it personally, but try your best to navigate the field and adapt your communication style to kind of help you in the process. And sometimes you do have to pick your battles. There have been battles that I have picked specifically. I have escalated them when the time is needed, but having that support from other people who've been through similar circumstances has really helped me. So I think the main thing I would say is to network. Don't keep things to yourself. There are other people going through similar situations, and by sort of utilizing that support, you can figure out how to best navigate the difficult situation you may encounter as a Black woman in healthcare. There's a really fantastic new platform called Black Female Doctors UK, and this has been founded specifically by a Black obstetrics and gynecology doctor who wants to create that kind of network and family for Black female doctors. This platform has helped me immensely. I know Dr. Savage was recently featured on that platform, and I think it's really fantastic to see Black women coming together, really supporting each other and having the structures there to kind of help other women in healthcare. What I can say now is that I feel so much more confident in navigating different aspects of healthcare, different challenges, and I love to support other women. So people can always feel free to reach out. In terms of advising young Black women who want to go into healthcare, I would say reach out to people. You never know how someone might be able to help you. I've had people reach out to me for work experience, and I've been able to help people where I can. So, you know, if you're really passionate about something, you have to take the steps to create opportunities. They're not just going to fall in your lap. Anything in this world is really possible if you put your mind to it and if you're consistent, because with preparation and luck comes success. So I will wrap it up here. If I could ask people to please check out the project I'm working on, which is called Maha Official. This is a new healthcare system that we've set up specifically to help women with their health. So not just gynecology health, but looking at cardiovascular health from a female point of view, looking at asthma, looking at these things from a female and holistic point of view. I would really appreciate support on that platform, because we want to bring services to you. And also my Instagram is Dr. Gabby Official. I talk about a wide range of different topics on there, so feel free to give me a follow, and thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Gabby. Okay, it feels a bit of a roller coaster, but I think if we hear from all of our speakers first, and then we take questions after that, The next person I've got is Dr. Amanda Chisholm.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on here today. So yes, my name is Dr. Amanda, and I am an NHS GP working in the West Midlands, specifically in the city of Wolverhampton. When I introduce myself, I do like to tell you a bit about my background. I refer to myself as a third generation Jamaican Black British woman. And the reason I think that's important is because it shows a bit more insight into what my upbringing was like. I was born here in Britain, in Wolverhampton actually, where I work now. And I grew up in a family that was very proud of its cultural heritage of being Jamaican and being Caribbean. Although England is a multicultural country, I did grow, it is a minority, Black people are a minority, but I had the privilege of growing up where I wasn't ever the only Black person. In my school, I wasn't the only Black person. In my class, I wasn't the only Black person, although being the minority. And then and also at home, at church as well, I was surrounded by lots of Black people and lots of Black culture. But then when it did start, when I started on my journey to become a doctor and going into medicine, that's when I started to feel the minority of being Black in England. And so my journey of being a Black woman practicing medicine in England, it has been a very enjoyable journey for myself, but like Dr. Gabby said, there has been challenges at times as well. I'd say that the first challenge that I first faced becoming a doctor was actually trying to get into medicine. And that was the first time where for my sixth form, I changed to a school that was going to help me get into med school a bit better. But it was where I was one of the only Black people there. And the support that I faced trying to get into medical school was really quite lacking. And the support and the belief of my colleagues and my mentors going forward through med school has been a bit of a challenge. But I really have enjoyed my work as a doctor and my journey through medical school. And once I did complete medical school and I went out into the working world, I found myself really becoming quite attached to community and wanting to be a part of community and wanting to be a part of preventative medicine. And that's how I found myself going into general practice and wanting to practice primary care. Since that time of choosing to go into general practice, I feel as though my eyes have been opened quite a lot to some of the health inequalities and disparities that are out there for people from Black backgrounds, BME backgrounds. And I specifically chose to work in an area where I knew there was going to be multicultural patients. And but more I did work, I started to see those disconnections. I started to see that sometimes, a lot of the time, Black people and people from other minorities weren't being treated as fairly. And maybe it's because they weren't given the opportunity and the education that was needed to really advocate for themselves. And so kind of out of that and out of the COVID pandemic and everything, I saw that I wanted to do more in terms of practicing medicine, in terms of empowering people, educating people. And from that, my online platform, what's called Life with Dr. Amanda, I have a YouTube channel and an Instagram page in which I share tips about advocating for your own health, basically. I share tips about understanding your health a bit better, and also tips about small actions that you can make day to day to improve your life and to kind of empower people with the education and the knowledge that they need to live healthier lives. I'm really privileged to be able to come onto a platform like this. And so thank you so much for inviting me. I think that it's really important that we have all types of people in these industries, especially in medicine, because one of the biggest privileges for me as a Black doctor is that when I am practicing and I treat people who look like me, often how much more relaxed that they feel, and they feel as though they're actually going to receive the care that they need to have. And we shouldn't be in a world like that, but I think it is important to have our faces out there and show that we're able to do these things and we're able to look after our people as well. But that's just a bit about me, a bit about my background and what it's been like being a Black doctor. Something that's enjoyable but has been challenging at times. And I'm looking forward to inviting any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Amanda, very much appreciated. I'll move now to Dr. Hazel Fofi, and forgive me if I've said your name incorrectly.
Hiya, can you hear me?
Just about.
Oh, just about.
Oh, you're a bit clearer now. You're a bit clearer.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
good. So hi everyone. Hi, my name is Hazel. And I must say thank you so much for inviting me onto this platform, and a massive thank you to Black Female Doctors UK, who sort of recommended me to the WAND organisation. So very, very thankful for that. So yeah, my name is Hazel. I am a paediatric doctor, and I'm also a part-time clinical research fellow. So I sort of split my time, half the time, well, most of the time in clinical practice in North London, at Barnet Hospital. So if anyone's in North London and you have your kids in that area, then you may well see me up until March anyway. Yeah, and then sort of 2/3 and the other third of the time I am at St George's, which is my alma mater. It's where I trained in medical school, and I do sort of work mostly in pediatric sort of clinical trials, but because of COVID, everyone sort of mucked in with the trials. So I'm sort of it's been more the COVID trials, to be fair. So yeah, that's a bit about what I'm doing now. In terms of my background, so I actually don't know which generation I am actually. Amanda, you might need to help me. So, well, my parents were born in Ghana and I was born here. So I don't know if that's first or second, but anyway. The daughter of immigrant parents, that's probably easier to say. And yeah, I guess relatively humble upbringing in inner city London. I enjoyed school. It was, yeah, it was a lot of fun at school. And I think similar to Amanda, I think growing up in an inner city area where it was very multicultural, I didn't really feel like the odd one out per se. You know, on an estate, you'd have loads, and even if there were people not necessarily Black, but you sort of had similar sort of socioeconomic backgrounds, and so I felt I could relate to quite a lot of people. I mean, in my school, our secondary school, our choices of languages were either French or Urdu, so we all had to do 2 months of Urdu, so I can just about say my name in Urdu, but yeah, it was that sort of area. So I think similar to Amanda, it was only maybe coming into sixth form, or maybe, yeah, trying to get into medical school. You know, you'd have teachers who, I wouldn't say this, well, maybe discouraged you, even if they didn't mean to. It was like, oh, okay, medicine, are you sure about that? And it's like, well, I mean, I'm a straight A student, so why are you surprised, sort of thing. And I think it's a case of, I think Gabby also touched on this, in that you have to sort of be prepared for the naysayers and the people that might try and discourage you, because that's a no-brainer. They will. Sorry, there's a bit of noise in my background. It's my mum washing up. But essentially, you have to just, I guess, stand firm in your sort of belief, and that's what I had to do. I actually, although it was predicted, you know, 3 A grades at A level, I missed that and only got 1 A in English. So I thought, you know, that's it. My offer was, I think I had to get 2 A's, maybe in a B or something. So I completely missed that. So I was under the impression that I wasn't going to get into medical school. So I was already making other arrangements. But you know, it just goes to show that it's not always about the grades, because I guess I performed well at interview. So as soon as I got my results, even though I missed the grades, they actually changed my offer from a conditional offer to an unconditional offer, which was amazing by the grace of God. So it went from literally from tears to like joy in the space of a few hours. And then once you reach medical school, that's another hurdle. You're then, you know, with a lot of people who perform quite well. You know, if you're from an inner city background or from a, you know, normal state school, and you're a high achiever, you're sort of used to that level, and then you come to uni or to you know, a competitive field like medicine where everyone is a high achiever, then you're like, oh my gosh, okay, now it's getting really deep. And then even with that, there was some challenge. I mean, I did well to sort of surround myself with people who looked like me. There wasn't many, but or had a similar sort of upbringing, so maybe not necessarily Black, but other minorities who came from similar backgrounds. And I think that was really helpful. And it provided a lot of support, you know, things, you know, other societies, so Christian Society, ACS as well. So all these resources were really helpful. And then in practice, I mean, hey, I think everyone sort of touched on it before, it's not straightforward, but there's been times when I've been discriminated against by Black people. I think I remember as a house officer in Whipps Cross in the East End of London, my local hospital actually, there was I think she was Jamaican, and an elderly woman who, when I opened the curtain to see her, she was like, well, what are you doing? I want to see like a doctor. And I'm like, oh, well, I am the doctor. She's like, you know, I want to see a real doctor. And I just was so taken aback because it was something that I wasn't expecting to hear from a fellow Black person. But so yeah, so that, you know, and you know, similarly, you know, someone might need to mute their mic.
Somebody needs to mute, but you've got the last few
seconds. Okay,
probably
so
30
anyway.
seconds.
Oh, fine. Okay. So yeah, essentially, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, you know, at work, but it doesn't come without its challenges, and that's not even outside of sort of racism. It's just outside of sexism, just especially in this climate where things are really difficult, and it's just a case of ensuring that you have resources available to you, whether that's family, society, that you can really just lean on, because although we are health professionals, you sometimes need people to look after you, you know, and we have to look after ourselves. So that would be my sort of little tidbit of advice, really, is just to try and navigate your environment, but also navigate and ensure that your own mental health is sort of paramount as well. So yeah, that's me. Okay,
thank you, Dr. Faithy, or Dr. Hazel. Let me just call you Dr. Hazel.
Yeah, Hazel. It's actually for fear, but I'm used to people just saying Faithy, so you know,
okay.
Whichever. But Hazel's fine.
Apologies.
You can't go wrong with that.
Okay, thank you. And now we move on to Dr. Glorianne Adumaika, and you need to correct me on that one.
That was perfectly pronounced, actually. Thank you so much for having me today, 1GK. I am very grateful for the opportunity. I don't know if you can hear me, actually. I've got headphones on, so.
We can hear you.
Perfect. I have to say thank you to my current supervisor, Marla, who introduced me to this opportunity. So my name is Glorianne, and I am currently working as a PhD student and also a clinician at UCL and Royal Free in London, and I work with cancer patients. But in terms of background, I was born in Ghana, so in terms of different generations, I'm a first generation, about 14 years in Ghana and then moved here, which is quite nice because I kind of grew up, and I grew up in a place where it wasn't really a defining factor for me anyway. I was just Glorianne. And one of the things that I noticed was that was a big difference when I moved was that growing up in a very small town, gold mining town in Ghana, I was exposed to heaps of role models doing everything, and everyone looked like me, so ethnicity wasn't really a thing. I then moved here, and then suddenly there was that first experience of being a minority and being the only something in a room. That felt different. Anyway, I did an undergraduate degree in London, and then following that did postgraduate medicine and started practicing initially in the West Midlands. Did my foundation training in the West Midlands and then moved to London for my core medical training. I've been very interested in health education and really enjoy doing outreach talks and awareness programs in churches and in various religious settings to try and really increase awareness about cancer, but also more recently COVID and other health issues. Because of the change I noticed when I moved here in terms of the difference in role models, and also in medical school, similar to Amanda, similar to other people, other people's experiences, I became very interested in mentoring other students and also being mentored, and I've benefited from being mentored by non-Black people, but also
sorry, Glorianne, I think just 1 second, I think someone needs to mute their microphone. I think it's Maureen.
Okay. Okay.
Maureen? No?
Can I just say, whoever is the host can mute anyone who has the microphone on.
Do you want to continue, Gloria-Ann?
Yep.
Because I can't hear the noise, but
Okay.
oh,
That's okay. I've unmuted myself. So I think I was talking about mentoring. So I've benefited from being mentored by a range of people, but working as a Black doctor, you do notice that often, depending on what specialty you're doing or in different spaces, you're the only person in the room. And it is nice to have opportunities like this to meet other colleagues who are doing different things and amazing things in their own spheres. But also it's nice for patients to have that representation of someone who looks like them and who understands a bit more about the context, a bit more of the nuances of the patient experience. So I'm quite keen to serve as a role model for students, but also to be a person who, in communicating with my patients, that I can have that connection that they might not necessarily have with some of my other colleagues. And so that's something I'm proud of. As part of the mentoring or trying to do more mentoring, I'm involved with an organization called Black in Cancer, which has a mentoring program trying to encourage Black students, both in the US and in the UK, who are interested in cancer research. Similar to other people, I've experienced I've had various experiences of discrimination, patients refusing to be seen by me, not being offered the same opportunities sometimes, but I also have had really positive experiences and have had great supervisors, including my current PhD supervisors, who have given me great opportunities as well, which I'm grateful for. Definitely one of the challenges that I have noticed anyway in my practice is the lack of representation in different research groups. So I've done cancer research in the clinical trial setting and in clinics, and you notice that there's not the representation of Black people in those spheres aren't very good, and I'm very passionate about trying to increase representation of Black people in these spaces. And so in terms of my kind of main aims, I guess, and passions to do with these, I'm hoping that, by mentoring, we can increase more people who are doing the job, and also by actively trying to recruit people into research and engagement and education, that we can try and reduce disparity in healthcare, which is abundant and very topical. So we could probably talk about that for days, but yeah, there's a lot to be done, but I'm very excited about work like this and this platform, and also seeing what other colleagues are doing in the field of GP, pediatrics, and all of that's very, very inspiring for me. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Gloria-Ann, Dr. Gloria-Ann. I will move now to one of our seniors here, who has a life journey that I think is testament to us all. Her name is Beryl Genevieve Juma. Beryl, welcome you to give us your time. You need to unmute. You're on mute at the moment.
Right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, right. I want to thank WAND UK for asking me to share my reflections of my journey through, the nursing and health visiting field. I was born in Sierra Leone and came to the UK in 1966 to follow in my mother's footsteps, because she had trained as a midwife in Halifax, West Yorkshire, before me. In those days, it was very challenging in terms of being the only Black person in the town. Sometimes you could go for months without seeing another Black person. Anyway, there were, nurses from Ghana and Nigeria and the West Indies. So we formed quite a bond. Having qualified as a nurse, I then went on to qualify as a midwife and then also a health visitor. While working as a health visitor in Bradford, 95% of my client groups were people from Pakistan. So language was a problem and communication was quite a challenge. We then had to use family members who, it wasn't ideal because when you're discussing sensitive issues, that's not appropriate. But the health authority at the time were quite innovative in terms of providing interpreters and also providing language classes for the client's group. But also, in a very innovative move, the health authority provided language classes in Urdu for health visitors. That's got me started, learning Urdu, although I wasn't fluent, but I was able to communicate, albeit in a rudimentary fashion with my client group. Having worked in Bradford for about 18 years, I then was appointed clinical lead to set up a community-based sickle cell and thalassemia service based in Leeds. This came about because there have been lobbying from various communities regarding the lack of services for people who suffered from sickle cell and thalassemia. So that was quite a challenge because, as some of the previous speakers have said, when you're looking at things that concern minority ethnic groups, you always face challenges from other health professionals who feel that perhaps it wasn't, these conditions were not as important. While working, with the community, it meant a 7 days a week, working, being that you have to be where the people are. So that meant that I was up, in the morning, going to, community groups, going to the mosques, going to the gurdwaras, going to the churches. You had to be where, the people were. It then came about that we had, various, innovations. And, towards the end of my working life, we had set up a really strong community group that were able to advocate and also to, articulate their concerns. Other than that, all the other thing I could say is that because of all these activities and challenges, in 2007, I was, can you still hear me? Yeah, in 2007, I was awarded the MBE for my, work in, healthcare. I don't know, perhaps, later on, people might want to ask me questions about other challenges that I face, but for now, I think I'll leave it to that.
Well, thank you so much for that, Beryl, and the other speakers on the panel this afternoon. I think we've managed that inside the window of time that was allocated. So now we have an opportunity for any questions to be asked, either in the chat. I can see one which is specific to cancer research. So perhaps if we start with that question, but happy for other questions to be raised along. So if I just put it out there, how was cancer research impacted during COVID times and the clinical trials? I think, was that a Hazel question?
That was me.
Or Glorianne, my apologies.
That's okay. So yeah, COVID, of course, as we all know, disrupted a lot of things, including cancer research. When particularly at the beginning of the first lockdown, all resources were all priority was on trying to fight the first wave. So I started my PhD 2 weeks before the lockdown. It's perfect timing, and was redeployed to clinical practice to work in general medicine as a medical registrar. And so my PhD was directly affected. Not just cancer research, but cancer care delivery was affected by COVID last year, in terms of recruitment, and things that were deemed non-essential were all kind of deprioritized to try and fight the pandemic. But I'm very pleased that we are seeing return to previous levels of research, and that's to do with funding and recruitment. Now that we're seeing patients face to face again, clinical trials are back up and running, and so there's still a long way to go. There are long waiting lists and lots of important questions to be answered, but the short answer is it did slow things down and did cause delays, but in the last 6 to 10 months, we can see that there's beginnings of a recovery, which is encouraging.
Okay, thank you for that. I can't see any other questions at the moment, but I guess I'm just going to ask this and maybe ask a couple of the panelists if they can give their views. What kept you determined and motivated in terms of your career, your journey, and your history? And I'm actually going to start with Beryl, but probably go to Amanda after that. Beryl?
Right. I was motivated by wanting to serve my community. I come from a background of grandparent being a nurse, my mother being a nurse, and also wanting to carry the baton, forward. And also failure wasn't an option. So, I had to press on. Whatever challenges you come across, you just have to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and get on with it. So the motivation was there because of the people that had gone before and following in their footsteps. As you said yourself, you stand on the shoulders of giants, so that's how it was,
Thank you. Amanda, sorry to pick on you. I'm just thinking who else might have a view.
I think it can be, there's definitely times where I have struggled with motivation. And I think especially where you're doing something where maybe your abilities are being questioned, trying to find the motivation through that self-motivation can be difficult. And so there's been a few things that have helped. In the first instance is the support system around you and people actually believing that you can do it. So for me, that massive part was my family. I spoke about in sixth form having trouble getting into medical school. If it wasn't for my parents saying that I could still do it, I would have completely given up then, and my motivation was rock bottom at that point. And so having people in your life, and for me that's changed throughout time. My family has been a constant, but also different friends that are in the same situations. When you've gone through a really traumatic experience, maybe for me, I remember having a very traumatic experience at the end of my foundation years. It was actually my last night shift. There was a night where we had so many deaths, and one really horrific one, and being able to sit down and debrief that with my team kind of gave motivation that I could carry on doing this. Other things that have really helped with my motivation as well is seeing the impact, actually seeing the difference that is being made. A lot of the time in the beginning of training, you often aren't seeing that. You're learning a lot of things, you're seeing what other people are doing, you're seeing how amazing other doctors are, and you sometimes can get this imposter syndrome. But once you actually start seeing patients and seeing people in your community and making that impact, it's difficult not to continue. I found that for myself anyway.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know if any other panelists want to add anything. I have a few other questions for you. So I can see Asha Singh, did you want to ask a question?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
I want to know, in all the diversity we ladies possess, how are we dealing with our own communities as such? You know, I know that one of the speakers said that she also had a little bit of a bad time with her own community, where people pick on you, well, you're not a good doctor, I want somebody else. I have seen that my own daughter is a doctor. And I know day to day doing, one time she was hit by one of the patients for nothing. So things happen in life. We take abuses and things. How do they communicate all the problems and things, and how to look after their own communities and people in general, even with all the sadness and diversities and all the abuses they have? I just want to know from anyone who's willing to tell me that, please.
I think, was it yourself, Hazel, that mentioned your experience? Do you want to say any more? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah, thanks, Asha, for that question. Can I just check, when you say how do you care for your communities, what do you mean by that? Like which community? Like
Well,
the medical community?
It doesn't
Black?
mean, you know.
You're on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Asha. We can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, I do apologize. I don't know how I was unmuted. Yeah, I just want to sort of know, you know, it's nothing to do, you know, we are all there in this world. God has created us all. You know, we are born the same way, we die the same way, we have the same blood. You know, it's not green, black and white and whatever. But, you know, what I'm saying is, you know, when you you are day to day, because as I said in the previous, when I was asking my question, that my own daughter is a doctor and she's been abused by people and things, not verbally, just was hit as well. It's very hard to carry on. Sometimes you get quite, you know, disheartened that you've taken an oath to look after the communities you serve in, and then they come back and hit you or verbally abuse you. How do you cope with this day in, day out? It's hard work. That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, no, I'm so sorry that your daughter had to go through that, because that's just not acceptable, like,
No, I know it isn't, but
at all. And I hope that she escalated that to, you know, her employers and things, because that's not okay. I mean, I've actually, on my children's ward, we had quite a severe, it was a mental health child, I shouldn't say mental health, but a child who was suffering from mental health issues. And she had, or was it personality disorder, something like that. She was really erratic in her behavior and actually fractured the arm, or dislocated the shoulder, I think, of one of my nurses. And that was just, and to be honest, she's not actually been able to return to work again. It's sort of all admin that she's doing now, which is not acceptable. No one's done this or got into this job to be abused in any way, shape or form. So for me, I must say I'm probably not the best at dealing with it. I just sort of like, you know, brush it aside. And sometimes you have these really sort of, dare I say it, older, demented patients who are very, what's the word? Backwards in their thinking, I guess. And so maybe they don't want to see the brown or the black doctor, and
yeah, I know
that, you know, they can be abusive in that way. And then you know, I always used to say, oh well, they're old and, you know, whatever else, but actually it's not okay. So I think what you can do is, or what I should do instead of brushing it off, is just to escalate it and, you know, tell that person there at the time that that's not acceptable, that's not okay. Even, you know, sometimes you tell your bosses and they might not do anything, but I think as a sort of yeah, I mean, duty to yourself, that, you know, it's not okay to tolerate for someone to do that to you. So yeah, it's tricky. I mean, other than sort of escalating it to the powers that be, I'm not sure. I'm sure other the other panelists might also comment.
Well, if
but,
anybody
I must say,
else
I'm not the best at.
I'd love to know that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you know, I've come from Asian background myself, and I've had a lot of, you know, abuses and things and whatever, a number of time. And one time, you know, somebody, I was going to work, and this man was asleep in the back of the bus. So I was being kind to him to try and wake him up, and he spat all over me. He was a white man, and I just couldn't eat anything all day. I just felt like, you know, I went to work and I bought new clothes and all these things. I threw everything away, but I just couldn't take this away. And I just couldn't eat anything all day long. I just felt really kind of like that I was still, you know, how many showers I could do. Things happen in life, but yeah, I know that, you know, you still take, because I am one of those people. I have volunteered with one for a long time now. All my life, I have been volunteering for something or the other. My aim is to, you know, change the world to a better place. I try my very best as a human being, that whatever happens, happens. You just have to move on. I have moved on. But sometimes these things come back, you know, when something else happened, and then they just come back and cloud your head. And I'm sure.
I mean, I think it's important to,
We all
I guess
are
keep.
in the same boat, unfortunately, where you can take so much and then break.
Asha, I just wondered if there was anyone else.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm carrying on like this. I apologize.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything in relation to that question? I think, Hazel, you're very right. If I can't see any other hands up from the panel, I think you're very right. This is meant to be a zero tolerance, but the amount of times where actually you do take a step back, it shocks you. But you do have to, I think as Beryl described, you dust yourself off. We now have policies in place where we're more able to escalate, but I know certainly in very early days, and this is just a snippet from myself, from my own experience at Great Ormond Street. I can remember the first day we put on at the time we had our nice red and white striped uniforms, and one of the little girls, who was obviously from a part of the country where they didn't have many people of colour, looked, it was myself and my colleague was white, and she said, "Why has that nurse got black arms?" Because we wore black tights, so the legs were, from her perspective, appeared to be the same. And it was my first challenge as a 18, 19-year-old to say to her, "Black arms and a black face." That was the description I recall. So I had to say to her, it's because my parents come from somewhere where it's really warm, but I was born here and I'm like this all the way through, but I can still look after you. But it was an interesting experience from a child, but it can be very hard in the situation, as I think a couple of you have described, of people saying they want a doctor, they want a real doctor. It really does take quite some guts to pull yourself up and say, well, you're asking for a doctor, I am one. Or you're asking for a nurse, I am one. But it's a challenge that I think many of us live with, and I think more so people of colour, but there are others who experience that because they don't speak the same way, etc. So I think it's something, the bit that I was going to say with that is another bit that I found in the past was my network. I think Dr. Amanda described that kind of the supportiveness around you, because sometimes even going through that process of putting things formally into writing can be a task in itself. when you're challenged as to what you did that may have caused it. So it is about having your network that you can debrief with and you can have that conversation with. Okay, does anyone else want to say anything on that? If not, I've got another question, which is really around looking at our young women, our girls, our young women. What would you advise a young girl, a young Black girl or girl of colour who wants to pursue a career in health? Is there anyone who would want to take a lead on that question? If not, I'll have to pick on someone.
I don't mind saying something about it.
Okay, thank you, Olamide.
I think earlier on, I forgot to mention a bit about my background because I think it'd be relevant for this question, actually. I was actually born in Nigeria, came to the UK when I was 16, and I did my A-levels here before I proceeded to go on to study medicine. In my A-level school, I was probably one of 5 Black people in my year. And I was told by, because they tried to prepare us for interviews, medical school interviews. So that was part of, the program that they had in the A-level school. And I was told by some of the teachers that they didn't think that I would be able to get into med school. And I asked one of them why. And because I asked them and I said, my grades are pretty good. I think I'd be able to get in. And he more or less insinuated that it was the color of my skin, which I thought was extremely brazen. But that is essentially what he insinuated. And he basically just said that they weren't quite looking for my type in university. So I then set myself on a course to prove him wrong. And I feel that I probably have hopefully done that. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say was, before I even felt that I could be a doctor, I was concerned that, I would be taking on this huge challenge, and maybe this teacher was right. Could they actually accept me in medical school? And I actually did a Google search of other doctors, especially doctors in my own position. Immigrants came to a different country, and I came across a doctor. Her name is Dr. Ophelia, and she's in America, and she had achieved so much, and she went to medical school in Nigeria. And I think it was just seeing a face that looked very much like mine, a story that looked very much like mine, that gave me that empowered me with the desire to go and prove any naysayers wrong, number one, but also secondly, to be that representation for a young girl somewhere in the world who's wanting to go into health, that is looking for people that look like her. And maybe one day they'll Google me and see that as an inspiration. So I think the first thing is that anyone going into health, it's to remind you that you can do it. You can do it too. If you have the desire, if you want to help people, there's a space for you, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't. The second thing I would like to say is that you are your own worst critique, and it's all about how you see yourself. Forget what other people say. You need to work on your own impression of yourself. I think it might have been Dr. Amanda who mentioned about imposter syndrome. It creeps up on all of us, and you need to just actively work on pushing that to the side. I think the third thing is, if you have people at the heart, if you have helping people at the heart of whatever you want to do, you will go far. If your desire is to truly help other people, your community, even friends and family, you will achieve something in life, because I think that's probably one of the best motivations to have. So that's what I would advise anyone coming into health. Don't let people tell you that you can't do it. If you truly want to help people, there's a space for you in healthcare for sure. And, please reach out to anybody on the panel. I'm sure everyone would agree. We are here to help and advise in any way.
Thank you so much for that, Olamide. Is there anyone else who wants to add anything to that? I do have a few other questions. I can see in the chat there was a question, a very broad question around the fact that many of you are working in primary care, and what are your views on some of the changes that are being proposed around integrated care systems, CCGs and NHS England. Glorianne's got a hand up on that one.
My hand was actually up for the previous question to young people, actually.
Okay, that's great. Go for it, because I'll pick that one up.
Yeah, beautifully said, Olamide. I think for me, I would basically echo what Olamide said. I think the first thing is is encouraging young people to believe that they can, and they can do anything they want to do, including working in healthcare. I agree that role modeling is extremely important. And for me, the first time I decided I wanted to be a doctor was whilst I was still in Ghana. My next door neighbor, who I really looked up to, wanted to do medicine. She was 6 years older than me, and because she wanted to do it, I thought I could also do it, and kind of carried that ambition through. I think role modeling is very important, and that's why I think platforms like these, again, are really, really key. I would encourage a young person to seek out mentoring. Again, we're all, I'm sure, available and very happy to support in any way that we can. I saw one of my mentees yesterday, and I said to her that, you know, some of the challenges that are faced are not because someone actively is going to say that because they're racist, they're not going to offer you an opportunity, but some of the softer and the quiet, the less tangible discriminations are just not being offered things in the same way that other people might be, not being recommended for certain things, or, you know, some people may have their personal statements looked at when you might not, and sometimes just being aware that, you know, some of these things exist, and therefore you might have to be a bit more proactive in getting help, and seeking out mentorship is one way of getting past some of those hurdles. But as much as there aren't that many people, and we are a minority, like Olamide did by Googling someone, or, you know, just thinking of creative ways, there are people out there and people are willing to help. So if you have the desire to work in health, definitely it's doable, it's very achievable. I feel like every job is difficult, so sometimes one of the difficulties when you don't see people like you doing something is you feel like it's, you know, it's so big and it's completely unachievable, but actually we're very normal people and you're trained to do what you do. And so if you have the motivation and desire, then by all means, it's very achievable, is what I would say.
Okay, thank you for that, Glorianne. It's appreciated. I don't know whether any of our GPs want to say anything about the up and coming changes, because that kind of takes us into some of the governance things, whereas I really want to focus this onto, you know, Black History Month, the achievements of Black women, or women of colour across the board, and what it's actually meant, that journey within health. So I can touch on what's happening with the changes, but they're very much government driven. The rest of us have very little say in some of the changes. Does anyone want to pick that one up? If not, I can move on to a question, or just touch on what some of those changes are. Perhaps if I touch on some of those changes. So from April next year, clinical commissioning groups will no longer exist. So they were set up, led by medical staffing, to look at how we could improve the commissioning of the services, so the buying of services for our communities. So the plan going forward from April is that we will have a partnership arrangement working alongside our colleagues in acute, community, primary care, mental health, and working with our voluntary sector organisations to think about and look at, let me not forget the local authority, to look at how we can better deliver health services together. A lot of work is going on behind the scenes with that. There's a lot of changes within primary care in terms of trying to work together more collaboratively in primary care networks, so that patients are offered a wider range together of healthcare. But it's part of what is happening behind the scenes. We're hoping that it will improve the overall offer of healthcare. And hopefully by doing that, in time, we will move away from a commissioner provider split, so the buyer and the provider, but actually we're one health service. So that's probably as much as I'm going to say on that right now. I can see an impact on, I can see a question that's come from Faye on the impact on professionals, and will BAME staff be impacted in a negative way? Faye, I think that it's difficult to say at this time. Management changes, usually within the NHS, do impact on BAME staff, because we've got reports, snowy white peaks, that suggest that every time you have a management change, we shrink the number of senior level posts. However, I think our panel this afternoon has talked very much about, yes, you can do it. And we have some good examples of people who are leading, and those leaders will be called upon to be stretched even further to actually take some of those leadership roles. I think it's a stepping up, where sometimes there's a tendency as well with some of what's been shared where people are almost discouraged from doing so. But I think there's a time, there's an opportunity, and there are lots of opportunities in health coming up. So I'll probably leave it at that. And I'm going to, we've got a little bit of time left still. I think I'm going to ask each of the panelists what seems like a very simple question, but maybe quite complex. What does Black History Month mean to you? And I don't think I've heard from Gabby, so I'm going to start there and perhaps ask each of the panelists to say something about Black History Month. Gabby, are you there?
Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
Hi. I mean, for me, I think Black History Month is really just the beginning. I don't think that 1 month is enough to celebrate achievements of Black people and to reflect on how colonialism has affected us in our everyday life. I feel like in the last few years, I have seen a lot of change, especially with some of the events that happened during the pandemic. I feel like people really are open to being anti-racist as opposed to just acknowledging that racism exists. So I think, we're getting there, and I think it's a great time to celebrate diversity and really recognize that to not see colour is actually to deny people of their heritage, and that it's important to look at our differences and celebrate our differences and strengths. So that's what it means to me.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go next to Beryl. You're on mute, Beryl.
I don't feel 1 month is enough, but it's a start. Getting people to focus on the Black history is everybody's history, really. Our history is really complex and intertwined due to colonialism and slavery and all that. So to get the wider community realizing that our history does matter. So I think, going forward, every body should be really focusing on the history as a whole, and that should include Black history. So for me, 1 month is not enough, but it's a start, and it's for us to take it forward. If we don't write our history, nobody else is going to write it for us. So I think we should be proactive and actually get our stamp out there.
Thank you for that, Beryl. Challenge for us all. Okay, I'm going to go next to Hazel.
Hiya. That's a really deep question. I've been racking my brain thinking, Black history, what does it mean to me? I think what it's meant to me has changed probably over the course of the years. Like, I remember as a child in school, I don't know, I thought Black History Month was just for Americans, I'm not gonna lie, because you just learn about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, you know, slavery, and then repeat again next year. Like it was just like, okay, like it didn't really mean anything to me personally. But I think as I've grown up, and obviously I guess the definition of Black is more than America. So I think it's now, for me, I guess it's a nice time to look back at the various forms of Black and what that means to different people. And Mandela, yes, of course, yeah. So yeah, the big 3 or 4, yeah, like it's a bit maybe more personal to me now. Like it's not just about America, and it's not just about slavery. It's about what's happened even before that and what's happening sort of now. So it's a time to sort of reflect and to look at the present and to look forward as well. Obviously, 1 month I say is not enough, but I feel like that's the onus is probably on Black people to ensure that we are teaching ourselves and our kids outside of October or February or whatever it is in America, you know, teaching them outside of that. So I think it's yeah, it means looking back at the present and then forward as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. I said I would ask everyone, so I'm going to go to Olamide, whose name I'm sure I'm saying wrong or incorrectly. You're on mute.
Unmute, sorry. I don't mind. For reference, it's Olamide, like oh happy day. That's what I tell most people. I think Black History Month, like everybody has rightly said, number one, I do agree, a month is not enough. For me, it's meant a lot of things. I agree with Hazel. I did actually think it was an American thing, but I remember in thinking it was an American thing, I remember thinking it should be for the world. It should be not only about, it should not only be about heritage and culture from the more Western side of the world, but also, you know, Black people in Africa, Black people wherever you may be. You know, I feel like not enough is known about things outside the shores of, you know, America and Europe. And I just feel like it should be about awareness of Black people wherever they may be. I mean, growing up, especially when I first came from my A-levels, I remember people coming to, like, you know, touch my hair and, you know, and all of that. And I just feel like maybe we should have a day where if you really want to touch Afro hair, if you really want to talk about hair and how often we do our hair, when we do it, feel free, come and ask me. You know, it should be about almost like a cultural integration of what our life is like on a daily basis. Yeah, I think it should be a whole bunch of things.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll come to Glorianne.
Yes, hi. I agree with everything that's been said about October not being enough and Black History Month meaning different things at different times. For me, personally, I find it as a time of reflection, a time to reflect, as Hazel said before, on what's gone before, about, you know, our history, the varied history. So for me, growing up in Ghana, my experience of Blackness, as I said before, is quite different from someone who was born here. And so it's just, sometimes we homogenize Black people and almost think it's the same for everyone. And for me, it's an opportunity to reflect on the differences that we have, which are all really unique and really, really interesting. But also I think it's an amazing opportunity. So we have a whole month to really champion issues that relate to Black people and that are really specific to us. And it's probably the one time where the wider society is focused on that. So I also think it's a great opportunity for us to shout about the things that are really important to us. For me, it's about, you know, it's disparity in healthcare is really important, or underrepresentation in different spaces, and really talking about those things. And I agree, if you know, if people are able to, in that time, be curious about things that they might be a bit embarrassed to be curious about because they've probably been criticized in the past for wanting to touch someone's hair, for example, then creating a bit of a conversation and dialogue. I think it's an opportunity to openly discuss and consider issues, but also reflect forward on the future and the things that are a priority for us.
Thank you, Glorianne. And last but not least, Amanda, Dr. Amanda.
Thank you. One interesting question. I think what everyone said has been, I'll try and say something different to everyone because I completely agree with what everyone has said. I think to me, Black History Month is essential. It's so necessary. In England, Black minority ethnic groups are what, 3% of the population? And so I can hear from maybe our other ethnic counterparts, our white counterparts, why do we need a whole month? If we're only 3%, 1/12 is much more than 3% of the time. Why do we take up so much time? And I think the important thing is that Black people, although we're only 3%, and actually I think Black people is 2%, it's ethnic minorities is 3%, even though we're such a small percentage of our population here, we have such a massive impact. If you look at just the healthcare system, for example, and you look at the workforce that is out there and you see the faces, Black people make such a massive impact. When people from the Caribbean came over in the Windrush generation, the change in impact that they made on the health system to actually make it successful and help it to run was such a massive impact. But yet throughout history, our stories have been erased from history. Even the smallest, it's just amazing the things that I'm seeing right now, even the smallest of things, such as Jack Daniel's whiskey, behind the recipe of that is a Black man. The first, and even the story of cowboys, something that my husband brought up to me the other day, was that cowboys, they were Black people. We have been erased from history. And so although we might have a month now, and it seems like this is out of proportion, and especially with the whole Black Lives Matter movement over the last 18 months, and that has become so much more prominent, it seems like we're not quite in right proportion to what our actual population is inside the Western world. Actually, it's so necessary because we make such an impact in the foundation of how the whole Western world works, and also that our history has been erased. And so I think Black History Month is so integral to actually having our voices found again, to show the population. I think Black History Month is there for non-Black people to learn more about us and to see more of our value and our validity, why we are here and why we should be here and why we should be counted, and make us less, not show us as others, but show us as part of the community. And also for Black people to understand more about our background, especially if you're growing up in the Western world, especially if you're growing up in a place that is of a, where you really are the ethnic minority and you don't see many Black people, often you may not understand your whole history yourself. Me growing up, even though I've grown up in a very Black culture, in a very heavy Black culture, even whilst I was at school, I remember when a lot more African children were coming to school, that the Caribbean children didn't want to be known as an African child. I remember this and I was like, and I used to be, someone thought I was African, I was like, no, I'm from Jamaica, what are you talking about? But then I went to university and I was one of the only Black Caribbean students. All the other Black students that I was with, they were either straight from the Caribbean, so from Trinidad come over, there was only 2 of those, or they were of African descent. But because of learning about Black history and learning about the diaspora and learning about where I came into it, I was able to find more belonging in other Black cultures as well. And so Black History Month, I think it's just so necessary for Black people, for non-Black people, because we've been erased from history, so much so even understanding our own history, that's why it's needed.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's very powerful for all of us on this call. Because there is something about understanding, and although we may only be a small percentage of the population here in the UK, we're actually quite a large population if you look at Africa, the Americas, and Europe. We're not insignificant, and history would have us believe that we play a very minor part that sometimes doesn't count. And I think Dr. Amanda Chisholm raised the fact of the erasing our history, and our history is very much the history of this world, because we're important parts to that. So thank you for that, for all of you. I think we have covered a lot of ground, and although there's a few other questions, unless there are any particular ones that come up, I can see in the notes, vital to note that women who have achieved from Africa also add a challenge of the culture where male attitude not supported to women to be successful professionally. I think if we opened that one, I think we could actually have that as a separate topic for some time. So I think I'm going to thank each of our speakers, our panel for today. I think it has really shone a light on successful Black women as role models for others in this month of Black history, but actually looking forward and looking ahead to what needs to happen for our next generations to come. The positivity that we've heard today, the rising above the challenges that people have faced to achieve great things in a professional perspective, but also personally. So I think I'd like to take the opportunity to thank people at this stage. And then I believe I'm handing over to Asha to actually do the closing elements of today. Thank you.
Hi, namaste ji to all. I bow to you, all the ladies. You've achieved something. Mary, you've been absolutely excellent. I am from Band, and I'm one of the trustees, and I take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you ladies. We are Black or whatever we are still women of courage, and we have got strength. I've come from a family background where I've learned things. I think the history of the world is changed because of the power of the Western world. It's not only the Black history is being amended or erased, it is the Asian also find that their history has been arranged. When they ruled us, they didn't rule us, they came to do the trade deals with us and then taken over our nation, and then they cut it into pieces. And we are at each other's throat now, that I am Muslim and I'm Hindu and I'm this and I'm that. This has to stop. We women have got power to bring the new generation which can empower each other's thinking and love. I come from a Hindu faith, and in the glory of all of you ladies, I'm just going to do 2 verses of my prayer, which covers, it is a universal prayer and also something we say to God that you have made us. We are here on earth because of you. You are looking after us. You are taking our sins. You're taking our sorrows. You're giving us peace and happiness and health. We are there. We bow you, God. You just take care of us. We'll take care of the world. And this prayer is especially in the 2 part. The one part is to say, oh God, come and look after us. And it is a universal prayer because it is for every single human being on earth, and it relates to everybody. We more or less need the similar things, whether we are Black, white, brown, yellow, or whatever, because our origin is more or less same. So on these note, I bow again to all of you ladies. And Mary, thank you so much from bottom of my heart for taking this chair today and conducting it so well. I am really proud of you. So on that note, I'll just say my 2 prayers and I'll finish this. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tasavitur Bare Niyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaf Prachodayat. And the second is Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukh Bhag Bhavet. Oh God, give us strength and give us health and wisdom which is the most important thing in this world, to carry our duties in the most fair manner we can do as women. Thank you so much, and goodbye to you all. Have a beautiful and wonderful day. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you
Bye.
all virtually.
Have a beautiful day. I wish I could meet
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All of
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.